TV.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program called What's Going On. We come on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Mondays. And we are let's see, what are we? The CNN, not the CNN. We are the Newsmax of Flint, Genesee County. How's that? And we are glad to have you here. And we know you're going to get something out of this discussion today. If you don't get anything out of the discussion, it's my fault. It's not the studio's fault. They're doing their job. My job is to do something different. I'm not the technicians. I'm not one of the technicians here, but the ones that are doing that, I can tell you right now, they are A-OK and at the top of the game. Some of them should be working with CNN. Well, I don't know, maybe CNN, Newsmax, Fox, you name the networks. We're going to be talking today. I said last week that we were going to discuss the article. I wanted to talk about the Article 1 provision and try to, not try, but I am going to explain some things about it that no one else is talking about. And I have to tell you something that I've been doing for the last, the last 8 or 9 days, ever since the 4th. I was watching some of the programs that they do during the holiday. These are commentators like Levine and some of those guys like um, Greg Kelly on Newsmax. Some of the ones I like to watch. Finity is a good program on Newsmax. And let's see who else is over there. Smith. These are good commentators. Do a very good job. But what they do when they have a holiday, they don't like to come in and do a new program. So what they do is they play some of the old clips, and they try to do some of the highlights of clips they played in the past that will pique your interest. And they had John Rue from the University of Berkeley in California on Levine's program as one of the guests. They did a collage of a lot of different programs, pulling different segments. And as I listened to John talking, I had to ask myself, after listening to his squeal, what happened? Because my training ended I'm talking about my formal training. My formal training ended in the early 1990s. And I have been trying to figure out, I've been trying to figure out for the last couple of weeks, months, whatever, listening to these scholars today. I mean, I'm trying to ask myself, what in the world happened? Because this training if this is the training that they have gotten in the aftermath of what I got in the 90s, I have to ask myself the question of what has occurred between that time period and 2025, because this is not it, and something has gone haywire, way wrong, based upon these are the scholars, constitutional scholars. So I tell you what I did. After listening to uh, John Yu at Berkeley and some of these others, Schoen is another one. Schoen, I think he spells the name. And they always talk about how they're the top-notch, lawyers and things like that. Maybe they are the top-notch lawyers. But I've been trying to figure out what is the training beyond that, because some of the things that they are going into and saying cannot be sustained based on any thing found in the Constitution of the United States. And I'm really bothered by this. I guess that's why I've been calling for the last several months television scholars. But I've been trying the last week at least. I wanted to go back and I want to see what happened. because something way worse than I thought has happened between the 90s and 2025 if the form of training is what I'm hearing being emoted by these scholars on television today, because this is not it. And so I wanted to go back and try to figure out what happened between the 1990s and 2025. And I went back to get a book off my shelf that I had on the shelf for a long time. I read this book quite a few years ago. This book is called The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution. It was published in 2007. So then I can say between the 1990s and 2007 for sure, because this book right here is saying some things about the time period. He's he's taking positions that would be arguments back in the time period that I got my training, and I would tell you that uh, when I look at these credentials here, these are different credentials than when I hear people like John Yu and these scholars. I can name a lot of them. They all sound to me they're parakeets. The parrots. This the politically incorrect guide to the Constitution is written by Kevin Guzman, and Guzman is a JD. That's what they are, pretty much. They're JD, and he's also a PhD. And I think that's where the problem is. These people in these law schools seem to be Juris Doctors. Doctors, they have a JD degree, and that's a very different training. And Guzman, who wrote this book called The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution, has both a JD and a PhD. And I think that's the distinguishing characteristic that I want to start out with in terms of why what I'm hearing on TV is so bothersome. I think that the training, something has happened to the training between the 1990s and today. And I think that Kevin Guzman has pretty much identified the problem as far as I'm concerned. I went back to read this introduction again, trying to put a finger on what has happened between the time that I came out and now, what I'm what I'm hearing has hurt my feelings. Well, I can't believe what these persons are saying. And I think that this is it right here. Let me read what Guzman says in the introduction to this book, and he makes a very excellent point about what I'm saying. As these judges are jumping all over the place, and they're just making all kinds of rulings over the lines of their jurisdiction, constitutional jurisdiction, and they all over the place making all kinds of rulings. I'm trying to figure out where did that come from? Where did that come from? How are these judges doing what they're doing? And then when I listen to these scholars, I see how they quickly move away from the Constitution when they claim that they're going to be discussing the Constitution. They move away from it so fast, and before I know it, they're telling me about the Supreme Court. And so I'm trying to figure out why are they running away from the Constitution like bugs run from raids, or like the Constitution is a plague. So they're not discussing the Constitution. They mention it and then they go to with some determination that the courts have rendered. And people say that makes them constitutional scholars because they mention it on the way to talk about the courts. You, I have to tell you, I couldn't understand that at first, but I went back to read this introduction again. I read this book a long time ago. It came out in 2007, but I read this book a long time ago, and I had to go back and read it again because this book was written after my training had ended. I was trying to figure out, well, what happened between that time period and today. Now, this book is not today, but it's later than when I came out, and this tells me a lot about what happened. Let me read something to you from this introduction to the book. Here's what Guzman says. Guzman, the writer of the book called "The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution." Here's what Guzman says: limited government and federalism. Limited government and federalism are chosen through. I'm sorry. Limited government and federalism are simply two sides of the same coin. That's a very profound point, and it's a very important point to to pause and try to make some sense of what Guzman is saying, because Guzman is saying what these judges don't understand apparently, and what a lot of these persons on television that are supposed to be constitutional scholars don't understand either, or they would be objecting to what's going on right now in this country, and that's what is really bothersome. Because if they really understood the Constitution, they would be demanding that those in the three branches of government stay in their lane. And that's why this is a very profound statement by Guzman, who is to the extent that I read, and they don't they don't have him on they don't have him on television. And that's a statement right there too. They don't have these kind of people on television. They bring on their Dershowitz and keep repeating the same parrots over and over again. Limited government and federalism are simply two sides of the same coin. To understand that is to require, is to demand that each of the three branches of government stay in its lane and the federal government stays in its lane in terms of the federal system, which demands that the federal government stay in its lane as well as a part of the federal system. Only a part of it though. And viewed as being a subordinate part of the federal system because the mother of the federal system are the states. Let me read this to you. This man is making a profound point. Limited government and federalism are simply two sides of the same coin. You can't even have a federal system unless you have limited government. And why would that be true? Because in the federal system, the power is not just demarcated around the separation of powers in Articles 1, 2, and 3. That's very important to understand. That is a separation. But more importantly and more emphatically is the separation of powers on the federal and the state levels. Isn't that true? On the federal level and the state level, the powers are separated also. And that's why what Guzman is saying here is so profound. He's saying that to understand one is understand the other because they're quid pro quo, the same thing and congruent with each other. To say that you have limited government is to say that you have a federal system because the power will be on the federal level and defined as such, and on the state level defined as such also, and allocated from the state level to the federal government up to that level from the states. Isn't that true? And isn't that what we ought to be talking about on the on these TV programs, which they never get around to it? The federal system demands, requires that the federal government stays in its lane. And in the federal government, all three branches of the federal government stay in their lanes individually as a part of it. Each one be co-equal members of the federal government. And what is happening in this country and what is so bothersome about it is because they don't understand the federal system, apparently, or they don't want to abide by it. It can only be one of those two constructions. They either don't understand it or they understand it and then do not want to abide by it. Or it can be a third thing, and there's to say both. They understand it and don't want to abide by it. There'd be a third, possibility. They understand. I don't think they understand it, quite frankly. I think the training is remiss, and I don't think that they have enough respect for it to abide by it if they did understand it. I don't see any evidence of it, and I know the persons on on TV that they're putting up there and making these statements about different things particularly on the left, Hakeem Jeffries and these dangerous people like Jasmine Crockett. This woman is dangerous. I can't tell which one is more dangerous. Is she more dangerous than AOC and Maxine Waters, or vice versa? They're all dangerous, but I guess when you're stuck on stupid and you can't get off that because you don't know anything, so you're stuck on stupid because you don't have anything else to go to. You don't know anything to go to. I listen to them and I'm stunned that they are. I'm stunned that they are elected and reelected and reelected and reelected, and they don't go home, and people don't send them home because they're not saying anything, and they don't stand for anything. They're over here today, over there tomorrow, tearing up speeches that they don't understand what was said in the speeches that the president gives, and then after he finishes, tears up in front of the public, and they still get reelected. Nobody calls them on it. Nobody says that that's inappropriate behavior before the world. The president of the United States is a branch of government to be respected. You're in a different branch of government. And your branch of government is to be respected also because you have defined and clear delineations of your power in that branch, and so does the president, and it's to be respected in both branches. If you understood that, you would not be tearing up the speech of the president because that's a branch to be respected whether you respect the office holder or not. If you respect the federal system, you would not be doing things like that. And all I see is disrespect. Somebody that would be respectful of the Constitution and the separation of powers would not behave that way. I can tell you that right now. You could disagree with the office holder, but you cannot disagree with the office because that has nothing to do with the office. The office holder was sworn into the office. The office existed before he was elected. He's sworn into the office. It already exists. It doesn't have anything to do with the office holder. It has to do with the framers. And for them to be castigating the office holder as if that's a subtotal of what is there, that's a Johnny come lately. I mean, I didn't respect and don't respect him having been president, and don't think he was president for 4 years officially and authentically and legitimately. I don't think Biden was elected in 2020. I don't think the American people elected Joe Biden. And I would contend this too. I don't think Trump would have been allowed to go into the presidency if they had prepared for it. I'm the only one saying that in this country, but I will tell you this: they had not prepared for this man to win this election because they believed their own narrative that this man had no shot at the presidency of the United States. And he had no shot at it because, from their standpoint, because he was doing something never been done before. He never been done by George Washington. And George, what I'm saying about George Washington is that no, he didn't have any political experience. Man was a military man. But you see, he had military experience. The man was the commanding officer of the Revolutionary Army. And we've never had, since George Washington up until the election of Donald Trump in 2016, we've never had a president that neither had military experience or political experience. And George Washington had military experience, didn't have political experience, and Trump had neither. And when he ran and threw his hat in the ring, he was a laughing stock because they were looking at the formula of the president for the presidency. All the presidents up until 44 had come through military or the political process or a combination of both. Nowhere do we have a situation where a person leapfrog over both of those, what almost like was like an unofficial institutionalizing of what's required beyond what is stated in Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States, which states very clearly the requirements in Article 2, what the requirements are for the presidency of the United States. But to jump over the fact that there are some other things that have always been in place for the presidency, which was something beyond what is stated in the Constitution, but in terms of experience, the military aspect and the political aspect, which is not stated in the Constitution, but it was almost like an ex officio requirement. So I can see why they were laughing at Donald Trump and not taking his candidacy seriously. And they didn't do it because no one had ever done this before. Not until, and in fact, others had tried that, but were they really going to were they really taken seriously? Is what I guess I have to say. Was Ross Perot, for example, really taken seriously? I don't think he was running a serious campaign. Ross Perot voluntarily sabotaged himself. He's running for president. Then he got out there and started making these his I guess his daughter was getting married or something, and he felt there'll be something coming. Something would be remiss about the wedding, and they're bringing her into this. Is the father running for president? He didn't want to have anything to do with her not having the kind of wedding that he had planned for probably all his life. And so he bowed out and came back into, and then he came back into the process. And when he came back in the process, nobody took him seriously at that point. He sabotaged himself. I don't know if you can't, you don't do things like that. If you feel that you're called to carry out a mission, and you own your game to carry out that mission, you're not going to be running and then all of a sudden quit and come back again and try to reignite your campaign. You can't do that. And when he came back trying to reignite his campaign, no one took him seriously. I was through with him at that point. But I must tell you something that's going on right now, and that is that and I'm writing about this two-part series on Facebook today and tomorrow, that we have got to start reading the handwriting on the wall of what's really going on here with these people looking around for candidates outside the political process. And you got to read not only the tea leaves, but read the handwriting on the wall, because this communists, they're getting ready. Seem like they're getting ready. I don't know if they can be enjoined against it or not. But this communist um, uh, man Zoran Mandina is running for mayor of New York, and there's a very good chance they're gonna put this communist in there. But I wonder if the ruling class has understood and read the tea leaves and the handwriting on the wall to understand how much the people who have been watching them over the years and have now awakened to who they really are in Washington and despise and loathe them. That's what this is really about, and looking for somebody to replace them with. That's what these elections are about. Donald Trump should not have had a chance to become president of the United States and didn't have what everybody's had up through President 44, neither military nor political, and become president. It had never happened before, and that was not supposed to happen. And I can see why they were laughing at Donald Trump. But we had not yet understood where we were in this country with the rejection of the ruling class of this country. And that's what that was about. It started with, it really started with Barack Obama, who's a disaster and a disappointment and all the rest of it, because they allowed a person who was not qualified to run for president of the United States based upon his lineage. A black president of the United States, they call him, and the first black president, which that's wrong too, because it's not the first black, because there's been some black presidents we've had, presidents that were passing under the 1/8, the 1/16, the 1/37, the 1/64 single drop theory, and some have been passing, but had black lineage and so on and so forth, but were born in America to American parents, and that's not true of Barack Obama in terms of his lineage, because his mother, who was American, but his father was not American. His father was Kenyan, and he was unqualified to run for president based upon the fact that his dad was never a naturalized, was never a citizen of the United States, which would have made Obama then, if his father had been naturalized, then he would have been naturalized to taking the oath and things of that sort. Therefore, can have a child, a black American child, based on the lineage of the father. But the father is Kenyan, and there's no lineage to the father to the American presidency.
And his mother, what I've heard, denounced her U.S. citizenship.
Renounced her citizenship at the time,
yeah.
and that's the question that they did not want to have raised, because they knew that he could not pass that test. But there was so much on allowing for something to occur that never occurred before. They're willing to overlook that. But Obama was ineligible to be president of the United States based upon the fact that he was to be a natural born citizen. And the question that I'm raising here, and it should be raised by everybody that's on TV talking about the Constitution, and I don't hear none of them talking about it, and I'm bothered by that. How can parents who are not citizens of this country, as these immigrants are, have children who are citizens of the country? Somebody try to explain that to me. You can't explain it to me, but just try. The immigrants, mother and father, neither of whom are citizens, can have children that are citizens because of the location of the child's birth. Where does it say that in the Constitution? They're trying to claim that that Amendment 14 declares that. People. I used to. I asked myself a long time ago. I read this book by Vernon Jordan called "Vernon Can Read." Of course, he can read. You're the head of the Urban League at this point, and you're supposed to be a person that has some background. But I wonder if a person can read. I'm not talking about pronouncing words. Reading is to be able to read a passage and understand what it is you're reading. And if a person say that the 14th Amendment bestows citizenship on those who are born in the United States, that they can have natural birth in the United States as American citizens, and their mom and their dad are not American citizens. I don't want you to tell me where that is found in the Constitution. And that's for all the scholars out there too, because I don't know what happened to you. I do know now because I'm now beginning to feel what Guzman is talking about. I'm now going back to see, because I had to go back with this question of what has happened between the 90s and today. Something has happened dramatically, because what is said now is not, you could not have said these things and gotten away with it. Now, when I was there, you can't be saying things like uh, Amendment 14 was to make immigrants' children citizens that are born in the United States, when the language is very clear that's not true. A child can read a third grader, a person with a high school diploma that understands uh, language. We know that not to be true. And so when Guzman was making this point and other points he made, it helped to concretize in my thinking what was going on here, what happened here, because no training back in that time period would have allowed these television scholars to get away with what they're saying on television today. John Yoo, that's him, and all the rest of them. Sean, Schoen, Mark Levine, Alan Dershowitz. They couldn't have gotten away with that in the 90s. Well, I don't know when it stopped, but I know in 2007, this book, The Politically Incorrect Guide to the Constitution, is beginning to talk about this, because as I read more of what he said in his introduction, here's what else that he says, and he's setting the tone and helping understand what occurred. Something has happened here. In recent decades, numerous judges, and particularly the Platonic guardians on the Supreme Court, have undertaken to use the Constitution as a blank check, allowing them to write into American law their own ideas of the evolving standards of decency. I'm sorry, let me read that again. Have undertaken to use the Constitution as a blank check, allowing them to write into American law their own ideas of the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. We're maturing. The law is being matured. As Chief Justice Earl Warren put it in Trop versus Dulles, 1958. Note the illusion of Darwin's theory of evolution here. if the judges, quote, conception of decency different from those of all their predecessors, then today's judges must be superior to their predecessors because they have evolved within their maturing society. And of course, if the judges' ideas differ from those of the majority of the electorate, that only shows how much further the judges have evolved and how superior they really are. This is not to say that every federal judge or every judge on the Supreme Court fancies himself a platonic guardian, but it is to say that judges face constraints, face few constraints on forcing their own views on the people as constitutional law. Listen to this point here. Yet for a judge today disinclined to legislate constitutional law, by the way, can you legislate constitutional law? I'm asking you scholars that question. Can you legislate constitutional law? I like to get an answer to that question. Because apparently they think that you can because they don't object to it when that happens. I will give you the answer to it, but I'm asking this question of them. These are constitutional scholars. They put them on television, and the rest of it, they don't put Guzman on there, but they put these constitutional scholars on television. Can you legislate constitutional law? Yet for a judge today disinclined to, quote, legislate constitutional law, the obstacles to self-restraint are formidable. To restrain yourself on the bench from doing that, when that is the going rate today. This is the going rate. People are, the judges on these benches, you see them one after the other, not being challenged either, legislating from the bench. This guy, I tell you something, every time I see this guy, I want to punch him. Judge James Bozeman. This man needs to be removed from office. We can stop talking about this stuff about impeachment. Everybody talks about he needs to be impeached. No, he don't need to be impeached. He needs to be removed from office. You don't impeach him. You don't remove anybody by impeaching them. That's another thing I need to clarify as well, because impeaching somebody does not remove them from office. It puts them on notice that that's the possibility if you continue the process, but the process may be continued to the end to obtain that. You don't obtain it by the impeachment. Do you scholars agree with that? Because I hear you on TV in the post-90s period. I don't know when the breakdown occurred, but that's a breakdown that's occurred. I can tell you that for a fact. You couldn't have said this in the time period, back in that time period. And they're saying it now, one after the other. Nobody's restrained anymore. They can say anything over the air. And now I can understand, having gone back to read the introduction again, I had to slow it down, go back and read it slowly, because I ran right. You know, you read these books. You just picking up the main points. You're reading one after the other. But I see now more clearly, going back to the introduction and reading it more slowly, what has occurred. Something has happened here. I don't trust any of the scholars coming out of the university today because they got watered down training. This is junior high school stuff they're talking about on TV. Let me read this to you. This is Guzman showing the mockery. Yet for a judge today disinclined to legislate constitutional law, a judge that disinclined to do that, it takes formidable restraint to be on the bench today and do that because you be the only one doing it. And the ones that are doing it, and I don't see any of them actually doing it, not even Clarence Thomas, this idea that they are originalists, the closest to it probably would be an Alito or a Clarence Thomas, but they're not originalists either. They're closer to it than the rest of them. Amy Coney Barrett, who got on the court, and boy, look at what she's doing on the court. And then Ketanji Brown Jackson is way out here, and Sonia Mayo. These people are on the court. I don't know what training they have. There's no training you can point to that justifies what they do on the court. Well, I don't know. Let me take that back. I should have said it this way. There's no training they could have gotten in the Constitution that allowed them to do what they're doing on the court. With the training they've gotten, yeah, something's happened to the training. There's no question about that. Like what they're doing on the court right now. Yet for a judge today disinclined to legislate constitutional law, the obstacles to self-restraint are formidable. First, he will have to deal with the criticism because you're standing like a sore thumb. I mean, look what happened to Bork, Robert Bork. Look, they created a verb out of the way that Bork was treated. They talk about nominees now being borked because once Bork showed that he was an originalist in the true sense of the word, there's no way they put him on the court. Not with the ones got to confirm his appointment. I should say confirm his nomination to get the appointment. He was balked. They got a verb out of what happened to him, but why did it happen? Because I hate to say this, because the whole constitution of this country has been balked. And it's the same thing that's occurred in terms of the money in this country. When I heard Trump say this, and he's wrong about this. He said that there's no inflation. The whole currency is inflation. The currency is the inflation because it's not backed up by anything except force. And the force of it is in fact hidden. But here's the force I'm talking about. This currency is legal tender for all debts, personal and private. I'm sorry, public and private. That's force. It's illegal for those persons to require you, as they like to do now. I went to one place and they wanted to require. They're trying to trip up the poor, and they were going to require. I was getting a phone for my step grandson, and they know they they don't have credit cards. So they charge them above the the amount of the payment if they pay cash. Now, cash not acceptable. They want you to pay with credit card. And I went over there and to stand behind him to hear that out of that guy's mouth, and for him to say that, because I was going to take him to court. And I told him, "You are going to take his money, because I know what that statement is about on that currency, not that money. That's not the word money, not on the currency. On that paper doesn't have money on it. It has Federal Reserve note debt. That's what it has on it. But the force is found in the fact that it's required for you to take it. No person that's in a store anywhere selling anything in the stores can refuse to take it. They might like the idea of having the credit card where you can have a 29% markup. You can't do that legally and refuse to take the dollar because it says on the dollar bill, backed up by the military of the United States of America. It's backed up. It's a military statement on that dollar bill. They're not telling you, please. It's not James Brown, please, please, please. You have to stay in your lane. You can't tell people that come to the store they can't spend dollars in there. And that thing in the currency says this is legal tender for all debts, public and personal, public and private. They're required to take it. You gonna take it, or you gonna see me later? That guy, he saw I was looking at him. I was daring him. You tell him. You said to him. You said to me as a witness to what you say that, and there's gonna be a problem here. I'm gonna shut you. I'm gonna shut you down. Cannot be done. You're gonna make the person spend money to spend not money, spend currency. There's no money. Spending currency. I go into the store. I'm going to either. Sometimes what they're doing now. I'm off a little bit of I got to get to my topic. My main point I want to make today in my topic. But I want to tell you this. They're so wary of the credit cards being hacked that you go and try to use your credit card. Because I like to pay at the end of the month. I like to kind of keep my cash in my pocket for something may come up. I mean, you have to pay something because, as it happens a lot of times, your credit card, they're so um, paranoid about their cards being hacked and somebody getting a number and using it and charging it to the account, and they can't recover the loss. So they block the card. They have anything that looks suspicious in the. They look at your record that what you've been charging. If there's anything that stands outside of that, they might refuse that payment to go through to be charged. Now they can do that because they got a question about the legitimacy of the charge. But not when you're standing in front of them and you got ID and all. They're going to tell you they can't take your money. They can't do that. But they don't know me from Adam when I'm charging online. And sometimes when you charge online, they'll decline, and then they'll block your card because they unless you call them and tell them that it was you, they're not going to let you charge on that card once they have a question mark and you don't call and say that was me and so on and so forth. I understand that it's a question to be raised, and a lot of hacking goes on with these cards now. So you constantly getting your card being blocked. I have to keep cash in case that happens. I want to do some things in the spur of the moment. And I don't want to go without what I came to get. And I keep cash in my pocket as a backup, but a backup to the card being used. One time the cash backed the card up. Now the card, now the backup for the card is a cash. Um, the cash was more legitimate in the marketplace than the card. Now they made the card more legitimate than the cash. I mean, that's a constitutional question here. Even in that, that's the law is now being voided. The law they're saying on the federal note, because all you have in your pocket, quite frankly, is two forms of debt. It's two forms. They say, what's in your wallet? It's two forms of debt in your wallet. One is debt already borrowed, through which they've already paid the interest on it by borrowing it into existence along with the interest attached to it. That's your dollar bill. That 6% markup has already been attached to the national debt when it's borrowed into existence. That's already in the debt of the country. It's been already figured into the debt. That what you go to the store and charging that card, that's being borrowed at that point, at the point of the merchant into existence, to which the interest is then attached to it on the other side of what you're doing as an activity of your own making. That's what's happening at the stores. And that markup ain't 6%. That 6% they're charging theirs, they're charging other bank members. That's 6%. You're paying 29%, which is disrespectful of the citizens who don't even know they're being taxed. They can tax you behind your back. And they got a very clever one right now, and that is tax you through inflation and continue to tax you through inflation, because you go to the store and come back and you find, as I experienced this just the day before yesterday, I went to buy. I don't buy I bought this liter, above a liter, almost like a quarter of pop in these larger containers, and it was $1.49 2 weeks ago, and it's now $1.79. $1.70, it went up 30 cents. And the reason why that is happening, by the way, is because the inflation is ongoing. Why? Because the currency continues to exist. Can you understand that? The currency is what inflation is. You print more of it, more inflation. And the reason why businesses go out when they put a price control on the goods that they're producing is because the government acts like it's not causing inflation, and then coerce the businessman to take the blame for it. And then when they try to get there to break even or make a little bit of profit on it, they punish them and tell them you cannot, in fact, raise your prices as inflation is raising the prices. Look, I'll tell you something. I'm ready to slap these people in Washington. I'm writing about them. And they don't say anything, as these scholars don't say anything. But I have to tell you something. These scholars don't understand what Guzman's talking about, because Guzman is talking about how he's talking about James Herndon's work back in the day, the way it's supposed to be. The way it's supposed to be. Guzman's talking about the way it's supposed to be. But we so far off of what it's supposed to be, we're not even there, nor are we even aware we're not there. Nobody today stays in their lane, and that's a problem. Bozeman is these people are sick. Bozeman is sick. This man thinks he can, this man actually believes he can order the President of the United States around. That's erasing the line of demarcation between the federal government and the state government. It's only two levels of government, by the way, that recognized in the Constitution, the federal and the state. And that's such a violation for a judge, a district judge telling a president of the United States what he can and cannot do. And nobody's talking about, and by the way, even after the Supreme Court rendered something that Bozeman did, James Bozeman rendered what he did, Bozeman continued to do it anyway in defiance of the court. And what shocks you is even him having done that, here's Trump acting like he has the respect that after the court that's above that court tell this man he's wrong, and they continue to do it, and the president telling them, give me a break. We're lost. This country is lost doing this kind of stuff. And these scholars, you look, it's you're the scholars today, and it's frightening that they call you scholars. People take your word for it, and you won't stay in your lane either, because you should not be on TV saying the things you're saying. John Yoo from Berkeley Law School. This man doesn't know anything about the Constitution of the United States. Guzman is trying to speak to that in his book. And I give him a lot of credit, having said further down, for a century now, instruction in American law schools. It didn't go on in my school, but they don't want you to call them schools. They want you to call them universities. Instruction in American law schools has focused on the case method. They didn't stress. I didn't have them stress. I didn't want to hear about the case methods. I want to hear about what the Constitution says. I know some of the cases, but the cases are the interpretations of it by persons, not all of whom and very few of whom understood the Constitution of the United States. They just, because you're sitting on the bench of the court does not mean you understand the Constitution of the United States. And I don't think any of them, all 9 of them today, understand the Constitution of the United States. There's no evidence of it. There's no evidence that anyone on the court, including Clarence Thomas and Alito, the closest to it, and when what's that one that died? Some suspicion around his death on the court. He went to something, and I heard Clarence Thomas saying later on that he doesn't sleep. He said, "When I sleep, I don't sleep with my pillow over my head." And I think that was like signaling his disbelief that it happened to how easy we forget these names, but that person on the court that was really pretty much holding the line on the court. I don't think he was the best we can do, but we got so far away from him. He was closest to it than any of the others were. And I can't think of his name, but he was not that bad. But there are no persons on the court right now. I can tell you this without anyone challenging this statement. There's nobody on the court right now that's an originalist interpreting the Constitution of the United States. None of them are doing that. Some are a little closer than others, and some are so far removed from it they might as well not be on the court as the ultimate voice of what the Constitution requires, because they don't understand it. Sotomayor doesn't understand the Constitution, not one whit of it. I'm not Roberts, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. This man is out to lunch. totally. Gorsuch, near Gorsuch. He's not there either. Um, they done scared this guy that they gave a fit to get on the court. They done intimidated him and got him now walking in line with this absurdity that we have passing for law in this country and the Supreme Court going along with these rulings and so on that should be challenged. And I will tell you this idea that we have here, the overarching idea that we have, that only the court has a right to be involved in the construal of what the law is. I don't know how we got to that point, but it's a post-90s thing as far as I'm concerned. I mean, because you didn't have it so far out in the open as it is right now, because they're all doing it on all levels. These persons have acted like there is no separation of powers in the Constitution of the United States. And it's in Articles 1, 2, and 3 of the document. And there's a further separation of powers in terms of the federal level and the state level. That's what Guzman is talking about when he says that is a limited government and having a federalism is one and the same thing. Power on two different levels, and that power on the two levels is the strain power because this level cannot interfere with that level. It's not allowed. The federal government is not allowed to order education in these states the way the federal government wants to do that. That's a state function. And Donald Trump is trying to return the educational reach of the government, returning to the states, and they're giving him a fit over doing that, saying he can't do it. Well, he can do it according to the Constitution, but they think that if the law is passed to say it cannot be done by the president because there's legislation that says otherwise. They think that's the commanding voice of what ought to occur because the legislative branch doesn't agree with that. But the legislative branch of government is created by the Constitution of the United States in Article 1. The Constitution overrides that. It exists before there is an Article 1 and Article 2 and Article 3. And everybody is sworn into office by saying that they are required to honor the Constitution. They're not talking about honoring the courts. It doesn't tell you to honor the courts, tell you to honor the Constitution of the United States of America. And to tell the president to stand down and that his construal of the law is less authoritative than the construal of the law of a judge in a lower court is an obscene reading of the Constitution of the United States. It would be horrifying if the framers came back here and saw that they're actually doing that, ordering a president he cannot carry out what's mandated in the Constitution of the United States for the president to carry out his mandated obligations in Article 2. Now, I got to pick it up next week and pick up of where this authority comes from for the president to act without the approval of the legislative branch of government in terms of what the president does in committing troops without the authority of the legislative branch of government, and where we are wrong in how we're now figuring that out. I'm going to tell you exactly why that's wrong as well. It's in the document, they can read it. But in the 90s, in the post-90s period, I think that we stopped being able to read it. We're going to understand it a lot better when we get to the second part of this discussion. But part 1 is what Guzman is talking about. I'm going to give you part 2 next week. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the